All right, a very good morning to you. It's good to see you. 5 minutes past the hour, and it is day 2 of the Africa Climate Summit 2023 that is happening here in Kenya at KICC. And of course, it will be going on until the 6th of September. And under the theme, driving green growth and climate finance solutions for Africa and the world. So today on the show, we'll be focusing on a very special group of people, and that is the young people and their contribution. And this is towards combating climate change, because like we all know, climate change is one of the defining challenges of the 21st century. And as we all know, the world is home to 1.8 billion young people between the ages excuse me, of 10 to 24. And this is the largest generation of youth in history. So these young people have made it abundantly clear that they want to be involved in decisions impacting the society, and addressing climate change is no exception. So today on the show, like I said, we interrogate the important role the young people play in combating climate change, and do they feel included, and especially in the ongoing summit. I was listening to one of the conversations again by young people, and they're saying, oh, we do not need to have separate meetings, you know, all together, because from the 1st to the 3rd, there's a conference. And this is the African Youth Assembly that was happening. So someone was saying, why do we need separate conferences? We need to be all together at the table and have discussions and deliberations as far as climate change is concerned, and what we can do as young people and Africa as a whole. So today on the show, again, we'll be focusing on the young people and their voices and contribution towards climate change. But before I introduce my guests for the day, let's take a look at some of the declaration that was actually presented yesterday on the first day of the Africa Climate Summit, and then we'll come back and start our conversation from there.
And I will now take this opportunity to usher in our youth representative, Ms. Elizabeth Wathuti, who has been, for the last 3 days, have led a group of young people from across the continent to put together very solid resolutions, ideas, and very visionary indeed group of young people who are joining in the discussion and want to be part of the action. They say they no longer want to be bystanders. They want to be right on the table. Welcome, Elizabeth, and your team.
Thank you so much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, invited guests, I stand on the observed protocol. After months of regional and national consultations, mobilization that accumulated into uniting youth from every nook and cranny of the continent here for the last 3 days to exchange and voice our concerns, we stand today, Saad Ukas from the Kingdom of Morocco, Dion Shukuza from the Republic of Namibia, and I, Elizabeth Wathuti, from the host country of Kenya, the land of beautiful landscapes and the greatest marathoners, as representatives of the African Youth Climate Assembly, to underscore the urgency of addressing climate change and its profound impact on Africa's youth. Our declaration, the African Youth Climate Declaration, reflects our commitment to harness the power of our youth to drive meaningful change. The African Youth Climate Assembly's vision is rooted in inclusivity, resilience, innovation, and the conviction that young people are one of the biggest resources that Africa is endowed with. We seek to elevate youth participation and inclusion in climate governance, forging pathways towards sustainable development and green growth. And we urge you, our esteemed leaders, to join hands with us in this endeavor. And we have our key asks from the Youth Declaration that I will invite my good friends from the Kingdom of Morocco and Namibia to present.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I stand on all observed protocol. The first demand that the Youth Climate Assembly came up with reads as follows. We oblige upon the key stakeholders to recognize, promote, and invest in the decision of the African Youth Climate Assembly to establish the Assembly as the principal forum for consolidating, meaningfully enhancing the coordination of youth engagement in the climate governance across member states beyond the Africa Climate Summit, and also further urge the key stakeholders to support youth inclusion in advancing Africa's sustainable development goals and the green growth agenda in continental forums. Further, engage the African Union Commission's Youth Division and Department of Sustainable Environment and Blue Economy to integrate the African Youth Climate Assembly into their structures, aligning, most importantly, with Article 19 of the African Youth Charter on Sustainable Development and Protection of the Environment. We further oblige upon parties to create an international or intergenerational green investment fund to generate green jobs for African youth. We would like to stress on this point that this was one of the most highlighted points from the consultations and also the engagements, financing youth action for climate. Further, lobby for the established United Nations Youth Office to be domiciled in Africa in line with structuring a global multilateral climate institution. We further also applaud on creating adaptation jobs for young people and equipping them with entrepreneurial skills for solutions and thus fostering resilient livelihoods. Further engage Africa's youth as advocates for increased access to renewable energy. Engage youth in exploring Africa's agricultural potential, in particular to meet the food security challenges of the continent. And lastly, to invest in youth-led research and innovation for identifying local climate solutions. And with those few demands, I would give my brother Saad Ukas a chance to give us a closing statement. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, in conclusion, our vision encompasses green investments, renewable energy, adaptation initiatives, and youth-led innovation. Your children are watching you today. We have to trust you, and you have to trust us. We call upon you leaders to enable us and stand with us in this crucial mission. Climate justice and sustainability are within our reach, and if not, one day we will be here at your place and with our countries burning and drowning, and you will not be there to save us. If we want to go far, we have to go together, join our hands to save our continent. Ubuntu.
All right, powerful statements over there from young people, and you know what the last speaker said, you know, our continent could be burning and drowning and you will not be here, and that is addressing the older generations, if I can say that. All right, so the young people are here today to just give us perspective as far as their contribution towards climate change and combating the same. And on my immediate left is Peter Budimo, who's a coordinator, Youth for Nature's Inuka Project. Good to have you this morning. Thank you so much for making time. I know yesterday was a very busy day for you guys, so I'm really happy that you even made time for us this morning. Abigail Kiva, host and producer, Hali Heva Podcast. Good to have you this morning as well. And last but not least is Gerald Lepario. I don't know why I'm tempted to call you Leparayo. I think it's from West Pokot, Lepario. Yes. Climate change ambassador, good to have you this morning. Thank you so much for all making time for us. And I'm just going to start with you. Those declarations that were read by, or presented rather, by young people. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you very much for having me in this program. My name is Gerald Lepario, as I repeat, as you said. I'm a youth from one of the most marginalized communities in Kenya called Ilchamus.
Ilchamus, yes.
Ilchamus community, the most marginalized.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, climate change is a reality. It's affecting everyone, all facets in life, both women, youth, elderly, children, both in global north and global south. Having said that, we've seen quite a number of declarations made by our fellow youths yesterday during the onset of this Africa Climate Summit, which I underscore those recommendations. However, the world has been driving so many agenda on climate action in terms of calling for the integration of the youth in every government, or rather any decision that are going to be made by government in regards to climate change.
Okay.
But the factor to implement such decisions have been quite challenging. One of the things that my fellow youth from Morocco, Ubuntu, resonate with a statement that was earlier said by the current U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, that the decision we are making today will define the resilience and the future of tomorrow's generation. Yeah. What I mean here is that if Kenya or the Nairobi Climate Declaration is going to be made on paper without putting meaningful steps to enhance the recommendations of how the youth will be at the front line to drive climate agenda in Kenya, I wish to say that that will be an exercise in futility. Okay. Yes.
All right. Okay. What do you say, Abigail? The declaration made by the youth, nothing for us without us. We need to be included. But at the same time, some other things, they also said is, first of all, just create green jobs for the young people. One of the most highlighted points during the deliberation. So I wonder what you think.
I think it's quite a surreal moment to see this happening, because I must say that we fought our way to get ourselves into this place. Okay. As I was part of the Africa Youth Climate Assembly as the communications lead. And the journey was not easy at all. And, every other time, I'd say the initial plan was, we were not part of the plan, let me just say that. But then we really had to fight our way to make sure that our engagement is not just, in a corner, in a concert.
Somewhere you're given 3 days, sort yourselves out.
But we really wanted to be meaningfully engaged, and of course this is one of the processes. And for that particular declaration, of course, at the Africa Youth Assembly, we wanted to make sure that whatever we are discussing is in line with the Africa Climate Summit, so that we don't risk having our own conversations in our corner and there's no opportunity to feed into the main summit. And that's why that particular declaration for us was very important, to make sure that, the government and African heads of states actually listen to what we want, and, not just listening, but also incorporating whatever our asks are into the Nairobi declaration that is going to be maybe presented tomorrow. And so it's quite a surreal moment, and of course there's so much more that we could possibly have asked for. But for now, of course, everything that has been highlighted is what we think is a first step towards a greater future.
Absolutely. The conversation has to start somewhere, right? Okay. But again, like Gerald said, it's one thing to have these deliberations and declarations made, but it's another thing to have it implemented, which I think for a very long time as a country we've had the biggest challenge in this, is as far as implementing, some of the even policies really that they're really, really good on paper, but then implementation becomes a problem. I wonder if you have specific timelines to see these declarations made, because so that we don't have lip service and that's it. But we'll delve deeper into that in a moment. I want to hear what you have to say, Peter, very quickly as far as the deliberations are concerned.
I think I can just take you from what Abigail said, that I don't think we were part of the initial plan. And during the launch of the Africa Youth Climate Assembly in KCC, I was listening to the president's statement, and he talked of how he has seen the passion, the commitment, the dedication that the young people are putting in place, despite sometimes, lack or inadequate resources. And I thought about this, and I was like, yes, you have seen this, but then what are you going to do about this? Because I feel like it has become a perpetual cycle where there is the need to have the young people on board, but the intentionality is lacking. So we are given the first 3 days to cut and raise, and then leave the stage for serious people to do serious stuff. So I think it's more of still what we talk about tokenism and ticking of the diversity card, that we had young people, we had marginalized groups, but is there really the intention to support the cause that the young people are doing? you'd look at even the planning that went into the Youth Assembly, and you see that there has been significant struggles, and the young people really went overboard to, you know, bring resources together, to even fund some of their own to come and attend the summit. But what are the stakeholders in the space doing to help elevate these challenges? Because I think these are things that can easily be addressed if the intention is there. And so looking at the declaration and what the young people are bringing on board, of course, significant to it is the establishing of the youth mandate. And the youth mandate will help institutionalize the youth function and make it like legally binding, so that the propositions that we are providing, they're not just mere suggestions, but actually ideas that need to be incorporated and actually be acted upon, so that next year, such a time, when we come back, we don't again listen to things like we know or we know the passion and the dedication, but rather, owing to what you've done, this is how we've come in, and this is the progress that we've made.
All right, and not just say, oh, you're the leaders of tomorrow, you have time, and all those things. But Abigail, very quickly, I'm curious to understand, why is this the case? The fact that, again, what all of you are saying, that you had to really fight your way to even be included in the planning, you know, of this summit, and also have your own time, you know, as young people to deliberate. Why is it the case? Is it that, you know, they don't trust the young people? Or why exactly is it that so many young people have to fight their way through some of this conversation, and especially when we're talking about climate change, which affects every single person, including the young people?
Yeah, I think I'd go back to the issue of intentionality.
Okay.
Because I think for very many years we were always asking for a seat at the table. And I'd say probably we have a seat at the table, but do we actually have the agency to influence decision making? And that's the biggest question right now. And I wouldn't know why we are constantly fighting, because it's actually really exhausting to try and prove ourselves over and over again, yet you know, we are inheriting the worst impacts of climate change. If anything, we should be the ones making the decisions. And yesterday I attended a children's event, and they also have their own declaration. And they were very organized, and there's this girl who spoke very confidently about what they want to see done. And you know, for them it goes as simple as, we want tanks in places that there's drought. At
the very basic.
At the very basic. And honestly, I feel like something different can be done to make sure that we are properly integrated and in the system, so that we don't have another summit coming up and then it's a 3-day pre-summit curtain raising for world leaders, and then now ours is to just present a declaration. And of course there's been many declarations before, so the biggest question for us is how is this any different from the ones that have come before us, and how are we able to take it through the roadmaps that are important to make sure that decisions happen in our favor, and making sure that we are actually embedded in the system.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. It is exhausting to always fight your way into something that is very important, you know, to you as an individual, and in this case, as a young person. So Gerald, again, like you said, you come from an indigenous community, Olchamus. And one of the things that you said is, I look forward to see the Nairobi Climate Declaration 2023 to put indigenous and pastoral communities at the heart of Africa Climate Summit. But earlier on, I think, was it yesterday or the day before, we saw indigenous communities also protesting and saying, listen, we have been left behind. So I wonder, from a young person's perspective, from an indigenous community, what you have to say as far as inclusion is concerned. And this, in this case, when it comes to not only have a seat at the table, but also have a voice, you know, to say these are some of the challenges that we experience. So a young person's perspective from an indigenous communities, what is the biggest challenge for you when it comes to, you know, efforts to combat climate change, either from a conversation level, but also inclusion as well?
Well, I will say, I will start by the concept of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The global goals was to set forth the progress that countries should make to achieve inclusion in terms of addressing the development needs of everyone in the world. That's why they are saying leave no one behind. Now, setting from that backdrop, indigenous communities around the world account for only 6% of global population. Yet, for many centuries until today, the indigenous community protects 80% of the world biodiversity, meaning for the world to, the sustainability of global community depends on how we put the central thinking of the role of indigenous communities.
Okay.
Cascade that down on now how the youth will play a central role in terms of amplifying the global agenda to combat climate change. I think coming from the marginalized community, or rather indigenous community of El Chamos, we've been bombarded by the climate change realities. The rising water levels of Lake Baringo has really displaced many people now in Baringo, including myself being a climate-induced refugee, making an history of living in a tent. But if you look at how the government reacts, how the policymakers react in terms of bringing the role of the youth in the national discussion on how the youth will drive certain solutions or certain practical measures to ensure that rural communities' resilience are being strengthened. By the fact that now the youth will drive certain cutting-edge solutions, you realize that government or policymakers or those who are supposed to make decisions are not really keen. They are not really keen in terms of how they will bring youth on board. That's why my sister and my brother here, being at the African Youth Assembly, it is like make or break for you to be being included in any discussion on climate change. Lest they forget that unless we integrate youth in any decision, let me tell you, we're not going to achieve the climate action. So the indigenous youth, we have our own indigenous knowledge passed through generations on how we can forecast ecological calendars, ecological events that can be able to help communities mitigate the effects of climate change, plan for the risks. But now, if those who are supposed to make policies, those who are supposed to make decisions at the local level or at the county level or both even at the national level, they are not even keen to listen to how the value the youth will bring in terms of amplifying the voice of those vulnerable in the community. So that's a big challenge, and in my view, I will say the Africa Climate Challenge, the Africa Climate Summit offers an opportunity for the youth now again to bring their voice forward, putting government's pressure, putting leaders' pressure on the essential need for youth to drive a national, regional, and global climate agenda.
All right. Was it you who said, I mean, if they did not offer you a seat at the table, bring your own seat and bring your own table, they will join? We need to go on a break, but very quickly, you also had something to say, you know, as far as indigenous communities and being sidelined, and this is what you said very quickly. So top-down approaches to forest conservation have led to sidelining of indigenous communities and the country's youth in the decision planning and development projects, rather. So, again, would you just, you know, talk to what he says very quickly before we go on a break, because I do not want to lose that point.
Yeah, I am personally a co-coordinator of Youth for Nature's Inuka project, and what the project is doing is it's resourcing and capacity building young people that are at the front line of climate change to effectively implement and scale their solutions, their nature-based solutions in restoration across landscapes. Now, this stems from Nature-Based Solutions, a position statement that we had developed earlier on in 2021, which significantly talks about the rights of the indigenous and vulnerable communities. And we realize that these communities have been subject to exploitation by the top-down approaches that are currently being put in place. You talk about forest conservation, you talk about indigenous and land tenure and land rights, and the way the government now, through top-down approaches, is coming to look and take over their land in the names of conservation or in the name of trying to restore biodiversity. And so we say for any nature-based solutions to be effective and climate action at large, the rights of the indigenous and local communities need to be centered so that we are looking at both the rights of the environment, but also the people that have been interacting with that environment, so that we are talking from the same script, and you don't just come to us and give us your idea of how we should coexist with our landscapes. And I'll give you a very significant example of the Guinea equatorial shrub mosaic, where the communities were living in shrubs. It's a more of a shrub settlement. And then when they were living there, they started planting trees. And then when the colonialists came, they found like there is these patches of trees have grown. And then in their own wisdom or lack thereof, they said the communities were degrading the forests that were there, and yet the area was a shrub ecosystem. And so they were forced to remove these communities out of that settlement, when in fact the community was trying to improve the ecosystem and the biodiversity within that area. And so we really need to have this, not just in talk, but also embedded in law. And that's why even in our nature-based position statement, we wanted that aspect of community, vulnerable community, and the local communities aspect of engagement with the ecosystems be embedded within the law that governs management of these ecosystems.
Absolutely. All right, so let's take a break, but when we come back, then we want to hear from you. So what is it that is not being done? And especially when it comes to meaningful engagement of the young people, and what is it that you need to see and your expectations, and especially from the Africa Climate Summit, again, which is ongoing, and come the Nairobi Declaration, what are some of the expectations as well from the Seven General? My mom also comes from the Sengwer community, indigenous. So when you say about the sidelining and whatnot, totally understand what you're saying. But again, so let's take that break. When we come back, there's so much to cover as well. During the COP27, the youth demanded urgent action from world leaders amid the worsening climate crisis. So exactly what does that look like when we're talking about urgent action? Much more to come from your world. But of course, all that is coming back after the break. Stay with us.
Your best skin with Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Body Lotion, now with 5-in-1 complete care. The deeply nourishing formula prevents your skin from drying with precious cocoa butter and deep moisture for smooth and healthy looking skin. Step out in confidence with our most complete care from the world's #1 skincare brand.
Imagine 10 people you know and love. Imagine if any of them needed blood immediately. This is a reality. Every 10 minutes, 10 people in Kenya need blood. Be it a mother in a maternity ward, an accident case, a surgery, or even a lifelong medical condition. These people need your help. Why don't you be their hero? Your timely voluntary blood donations will ensure our blood banks never dry up. Save a life today. Donate blood regularly at a county blood donation satellite near you. Changia damu, okoa maisha. Be the lifeline.
Benefits of ordering with Glovo. Glovo allows you to order anything you want at the comfort and convenience of your home. Craving fried chicken or pilau or pizza? Easy and simple. Order on Glovo today. Glovo, order anything, we deliver in minutes. With Glovo you order anything unataka and when you get it una celebrate because kukuchoma imefika na wakati keki inafika ndio sherehe inaanza. Order Glovo will deliver in minutes.
Join the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum under the leadership of CS Davis Chirchir as they delve into the financing and development of the sector during the Nation Leadership Forum. Watch it live on NTV from the Kawi Complex on Tuesday, September 5th, starting from 7:30 p.m. This forum will focus on climate action financing and the green growth agenda, both of which will be central themes in the Africa Climate Summit 2023. Don't miss this opportunity to discover how Kenya is bolstering its energy reserves, all while working towards achieving 100% grid-scale green energy by 2030. Tune in and be part of the energy revolution.
Mama Stevo, where are the kids?
I think they're upstairs doing their revision.
Oh, you guys are here. Maria and Steve, which revision papers are you doing today?
Baba, mimi nashughulikia maswali ya marudio ya somo la Kiswahili kutoka kwa gazeti la Taifa Leo.
Na wewe?
I am working on the mathematics revision paper from the Junior Sport magazine of the Daily Nation.
Wow, this is wonderful. Are the revision papers from Taifa Leo and Daily Nation working for you guys?
Yes, Dad. Wanauliza maswali yao kwa njia nzuri na nyepesi sana.
And the questions are in tandem with our syllabus.
Dear parents, invest in Taifa Leo and Junior Sport for KCPE and KCSE revision papers. Kwa maswali ya gazeti la Taifa Leo, usiukose uhondo huo kila Jumatatu hadi Jumamosi. In our Junior Sport, it's every Monday. Do not miss out.
Own your dream home for as low as 1.98 million Kenya shillings in Vipingo Kilifi. SMS Vipingo to 22365 or call us today on 0740 400 215. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, welcome back. And today on the show, again, we're still talking about climate change. Like we said, this is a very big week for us as a continent, and this is the African continent, as Nairobi hosts the Africa Climate Summit 2023. And again, we cannot underscore the importance of having these conversations, really. And most importantly, in that is including the young people who are creative, they're very innovative, they are energetic. They have so much to offer as far as, solutions to climate change. But at the same time, they are sidelined. And during the break, we were having a conversation and asked, so is it enough? And they said, bare minimum. Okay. So what exactly does enough look like? And when we're talking about meaningful engagement as well, because again, like we said, remember, we have 1.8 billion young people between the ages of 10 to 24, and this is the largest generation of youth in history. So if we do not include them in such conversations, then what's going to happen? Because the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said at some point and said, unless we act now, the 2030 agenda will become an epitaph for a world that might have been. Okay. So how important is it for us to include the young people into the conversation? And during the break, Gerald was telling us about how you study InterScience. Is it okay for you to share? That's very interesting. And again, we're talking about integration of traditional science. Yes. And of course, as a young person, I want to believe this is very important to you, that yes, in as much as we are embracing technology, yes. And this is, when it comes to the weather and predicting weather, the Met Department just told us the other day that we should brace for El Nino, right? So yeah, the traditional science and embracing benefit technology, what exactly does that mean to you? And please just tell us the InterScience story. That's very interesting. You said your committee, you studied that.
It is the only Lepario's family in the entire Chamus community that studies science, the science of intestine.
And predict the weather.
To predict weather, including ecological calendars.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so, how's that? Yes.
What normally happens, that's a very powerful wisdom. When we slaughter livestock, let's say, a goat, for instance. So we open the intestine. You can see how the intestines are telling how rivers will flow.
Okay.
Is it devastating floods? It will tell you if there's some spots of catastrophic in terms of submerging of villages. So that at a practical level, an ordinary person cannot understand. But personally, because that wisdom was bestowed to me by our forefathers, indigenous knowledge is being passed through generations.
Yes.
So from the earlier generation to this current generation, I can be able to study how the intestines are telling. How the intestines are telling us about what happened with this drought. What is the strength of motivation that the community will do to navigate the food crisis?
Okay.
Now, a key example was the rising water levels of Lake Baringo. The intestine predicted accurately.
Yeah.
The Titus Lepario told the community, brace for submerging of villages, and I strongly recommend that people now should move to higher grounds. Because Lake Baringo water levels will stretch for another 12 kilometers. And let me tell you, it happened. Schools were submerged, villages were submerged, community lost livelihoods. Then again, science meteorological department never predicted that. What the ecologists reacted about is that the rising water levels was because of the shifting of tectonic plates. It's because of they said the tectonic plates shifted. Then again they said, the lake is reclaiming its originality. But now they failed to warn the community on the looming of the rising water levels of Lake Baringo. And that is, it was a gap, a knowledge gap between government and the indigenous community of El Chamos. If government had listened to what the indigenous knowledge forecasted about the rising water levels of Lake Baringo, they could have actually integrated that data into government management and planning risk in terms of making communities now to mitigate such
mitigation.
risk.
Okay, so, I hear you. Yes. And you also said you predicted El Nino, right?
And for a fact, if El Nino won't happen, I'm going to give you a cow.
Okay, I will hold you to it, and I'm so happy that
Intestine actually has predicted it.
Yeah.
Intestine predicted even the handshake between Raila Odinga and former President Uhuru Kenyatta.
Okay.
For a fact.
He predicted the same.
Through the study through the study of the intestine and through the study of stars.
Okay.
Yes.
Hey, let me tell you, and I'm so curious, like, is it the color, is it the shape, is it the, okay, so many questions for you, but again, I hear you. So integration.
Yes.
Understanding the local communities, because again, like we said, they have the solutions to some of these issues that, that are affecting them. Before I come to you to understand, so then what is enough? What exactly does meaningful engagement look like? Because again, there's also that intergenerational gap, which, you talked about, and how important it is for us to cover that. As again, I was listening to this young person who was saying, a person who's 60, what do they know about the future? They do not give us chances to also, it was a whole lot of conversation. But before that, the president was actually attended, was it the last day of the Africa Youth Assembly? So let's get to hear what he said very quickly, and then we'll come back to you to understand. So then what does enough look like when we're talking about meaningful engagement with the young people and the expectations from the Africa Climate Summit?
I am also encouraged that the young people of our continent are stepping forward boldly to say we don't want to be bystanders. We do not want to be attendees of conferences and ushers in places. We want to participate. We have ideas. We have suggestions. We have positions that we can, perspectives that we can present on the one single challenge that faces humanity and that threatens our future. And the young people being the greatest stakeholders of that future, you are rightly in place to make suggestions about this existential threat that affects not just our present, but also threatens our future, where you are the greatest stakeholders.
All right, Abigail, what do you have to say to the president's sentiments as far as young people, are concerned?
I think, give credit where it's due. Of course, there's so much more that we would want to see, but as I said before, it's the first step towards a better future and better engagement.
Yeah.
And to your question about what meaningful engagement actually looks like, I'll give an example. So, of course, there are very many processes and policy processes that gets us to make decisions on climate change. And of course, everything culminates at the Conference of Parties every other end of the year. But that is the UNFCCC system. But we also have we also have the CBD COP, that is the combating desertification, and we also have the COP on biodiversity loss. So there has to be a way in which all these processes feed into each other, because they take place in different times of the year, and I feel like it's almost detached from each other. So that is one issue. The second issue is, of course, when we are preparing to go to COP, decisions are made way back in January or February. And of course, when you look at Africa, we have the Africa group of negotiators, and we have, other technical expert groups that support this particular process. But then we are only brought to have conversations and do a statement in November or in October, just before the COP. So at what point do our statements actually feed into the main process? So it doesn't make sense to me to have us come together during the Conference of Youth, the Regional Conference of Youth, the local Conference of Youth, and come up with a statement that will only read at a COP in maybe one of the meetings, yet when it mattered at the very beginning of the year, we were not part of the process. So that's also something I feel completely detaches from what meaningful engagement actually looks like. And then thirdly, it's not just a matter of ticking the box or having a young person on the panel. You said something about the intergenerational dialogue, which I think is very important. I know we say, young people are the ones who know, but I also feel like there should be an opportunity where we get to listen from the elders, and they also get to listen.
I mean, there were
us.
Young people at some point, right?
Yes, they were young people at some point, and I think it's important to learn from their let me say failures and experiences, so that we also find a way in which we can fill those gaps that they never managed to actually cover. So intergenerational dialogue is important, involving us from the start, and also finding a way in which all these processes feed into each other, so that when we come to COP, where all decisions are actually made, but really I don't think it's where all decisions are made, there's some conversation that has already begun from the start. And lastly, also I have come to a place where I feel COP itself has become too much. At COP27, I was in a meeting, and we were asked to, it was actually an interactive session with young people, and we were told to give a message for COP37. And I remember thinking, will I possibly be sitting here 10 years later asking for loss and damage fund? Or asking for doubling up of the adaptation fund, or asking for tripling of renewable energy capacity for Africa? That would be extremely exhausting, and I would feel like I have failed the generation that is to come.
That's true. That's true. And just sticking on the same, because again, I was about to ask you, so do you feel like we have been failed by the previous generations? I wonder what you have to say to that, Bulimo.
I think the problem has been systemic. Because looking at how things were being done from the previous generations, you would hear things like kids to go play far because elders want to talk. And so we have carried that narrative up to today.
Yeah.
We want to demand for inclusion at the table, but those who are deemed as the elders don't really think we have what
You
it
have
takes
anything to say.
to be at that table. But look, the African youth, for example, we make up like 70% of the African population. By 2042, we'll be making about 42% of the global youth population. You cannot make a decision for such a demographic without including them. And so, given the problem is systemic, we really need to have a systematic way with which we can transition into a new way of thinking, a paradigm where we consider the proposals and the ideas and the opinions of young people and have that intergenerational dialogue and knowledge sharing where we can come to a consensus and say, yes, this can work, this cannot work. We can approach this through this approach. Maybe this approach has been outdated. Let us look at this other approach. And I can give an example. For example, in policy, the ideas and the suggestions that you are bringing on board, can we have some of these propositions actually implemented? In action, for instance, we see like organizations, like the organization that I'm working for, we are trying to resource and capacity build young people to implement their own projects. But financing is lacking. And even beyond financing, we also have like the mentorship, the intergenerational dialogue that you're talking about. You go to an expert and you want them to give the young people their wisdom on how they navigated this landscape, and they are always kind of busy. It's always, can we schedule for next time? And these small challenges are, again, the ones that are bringing the problem. There is the DUAPA project that Kenya Environmental Action Network is currently implementing, and that project is integrating technology in mapping ecosystems and providing data to shape how the restoration will unfold. Now, what sets the project apart is that in the integration of that technology, they have centered young people and and the vulnerable communities, and the communities that actually are operating the drones and the phone technology to actually map their own sites and generate their own local data. And that is what, for me, ENAFS looks like. Like, are you being intentional when you want to do this? Because you cannot just bring an expert, do things, and then provide some data, and then you want us to, you know, use the data. How do you meaningfully include someone in a process so that they feel like they co-own the process?
Okay, all right. So we have limited time before we end the conversation, and my biggest question would be, because as it is, and given what all of you are saying, is you literally have to fight your way to be included in not only the conversations, but also decision-making processes as well, despite the fact that some of these things, and especially the decisions that I've made, end up impacting, you know, the young people in one way or the other. So my question is then, what will it take for us to get to that level where we don't have to negotiate at it? Oh, do we get the young people or do we not? What will it take for us to get there? And then the second question would be, so what are your biggest expectations? What are some of the conversations that need to be held at this ongoing summit? I'm going to begin with you, Gerald, very quickly, so that we bring this conversation to a close.
The Nairobi Climate Declaration should just drive two agenda.
Okay.
First of all, from the theme, driving green growth, harnessing the Africa climate finance. Basically, what is the role of youth in driving this global climate or green transition? What's the role of the youth? What is the role of the youth in respect to Africa climate finance? The simple mathematics here is that there is focusing on the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, provided the basic framework on how countries around the world should pledge, commit to implement their national climate goals within a certain period of time. From 2023 to 2030. Kenya set an example to say we will decarbonize 33% by 2030. 2030
All right.
under the framework of United Nations Convention framework on climate change.
Yeah.
The same principle should apply on Nairobi Climate Declaration in the sense that these declarations offer the youth an opportunity that the cutting-edge solutions in terms of green technologies, in terms of green jobs, in terms of harnessing practical solution to drive food security, harnessing solution to drive, let's say, afforestation, that if if Kenya is going to get, let's say, $10 billion to fight for deforestation, the youth should be allocated a certain percentage of resources in terms of investing in their solutions.
Okay.
Green technologies, invest on youth innovations by giving the actual framework and implementing matrix guided by the Kenyan government national climate agenda to achieve its goal by 2030.
I see that.
Yes.
I see that. All right. Thank you so much, Gerald. All right, Abigail?
So to your question on what does it take to be meaningfully engaged, one I would say is how we package ourselves.
And as young people?
Yes.
Okay.
And if we didn't fight for this particular assembly, I don't think we would have been taken seriously. And I think this is one situation where we brought our table and we invited them to join us, and they did. And they did.
All right.
And in terms of what my expectations are for that particular summit, of course, he's spoken about the green growth and climate finance. And when you're talking about climate finance, I'll ask, where are the solutions? Where are the innovations? It's with the youth. We're the ones to implement it. And for the assembly, we were also very key to showcase and spotlight grassroots solutions. And so for us, it was showing African youth as solution providers rather than victims. And so what that is meant to do, especially on the communication side, is to give a platform where we say, we actually have solutions, we just need the funding. So we are ready for your money to come down to us, and we're going to scale up and create the solutions that the world needs to see. And the other expectation, of course, Africa has great potential for renewable energy, and we keep saying this over and over again. And we know that there's 600 million people without access to electricity in Africa. And of course, when you're looking at development, when you're looking at even people living decent lives, energy is such a key thing or a key recipe to making sure that Africa as a whole is secure. And so for this particular summit, I'm really looking to see conversations that are honest about our situations, about what it actually means for Africa to transition. And of course, when you look at what transition means for us, a lot of it goes back to green minerals, which is also a big conversation at the summit. And when you look at all these components, it also opens up an opportunity for young people where the talent is, the skill is. And so we really need to make sure that we are readying ourselves for the opportunity that is to come. So in terms of capacity building, in terms of creating opportunities where we can grow our skills to make sure that when the money comes and when the time comes for us to transition, which has already started, we are ready and we can be the ones that are taking the world forward.
I see that. All right. Hey, so these two have cleared like your minute, all right? So 45 seconds as far as the expectations are concerned, very quickly.
I think number one is just taking cue from what Abby says, let's bridge the intergenerational gap.
All right.
The conversation of us versus them, we should skew towards collaboration and not competition. And then to your second question, I think young people have shown resilience, we have shown leadership, we have shown that we are not victims, but we are experts, we can co-lead on solutions in the face of the nature and biodiversity and climate crisis. But what is lacking, of course, is the mentorship, is the resources, the finances, and a platform to showcase our innovations and ideas. Again, if we can just provide that, I think we are set to go.
All right. Okay. I'll be tempted to ask, so then your expectations come COP28, because the declaration, Nairobi Declaration, will form Africa's position, even as we go to negotiate at COP28. But time is not on our side. So thank you so much for coming by today. Peter Bulimo, who's a coordinator, Youth for Nature's Inuka Project, Abigail Kima, host and producer, Hali Hewa Podcasts, and not forgetting Gerald Lepario, who is a climate change ambassador all the way from Ilchamus, Baringo. Thank you so much for your time this morning. All the very best best, even as you, again, continue with the deliberations and conversations on climate change. And time for us to say goodbye right here on Your World, but it doesn't mean that conversations on climate change end, because, again, remember, the Africa Climate Summit continues all the way throughout the week until Thursday, Friday. Okay, tomorrow, but is the last day, and we expect to see the Nairobi Declaration. And yes, that is KICC. What you're seeing over there, host of activities and delegations, arriving over there. So yes, let's cross over there because we have our editor-in-chief, Mr. Joe Ageo, together with our sustainability editor, that is Zainab Wandati, on the ground, together with a host of other reporters, again, who are there to bring you what exactly is happening at KICC. My name is Winnie Lubembe. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you tomorrow, same time, same place, right here on Your World. But we leave you with live pictures from KICC.